на цьому фоні. Okay, everyone. So we are going to slowly start our next session. So I encourage everyone to take your seats. All right. Here we have with us Markiyan Kliuchkovskyi, who is representing very interesting organization. Probably that's a quite unique. I don't know. Can I call it like a venture? Yeah, which was, from the best of my knowledge, initiated by Markiyan. Yeah, and I would like. I think that everyone is already curious to hear a bit more about what this register, at what stage it's now, and what should we expect, and what can we do later on. So I'll give the floor to Markiyan, who is previously used to be a partner of one of the largest Ukrainian law firm, and at these days he is executive director of the Register of Damages caused by Russia Federation to Ukraine. So Markiyan, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Andrii. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the invitation to come to this forum and speak. It is important for us to inform everyone about what we are, what we do, and why what we do is important. Just in terms of very brief introduction, we, as lawyers, we know that under international law, the issue of reparations is not a controversial one. If a state commits an internationally wrongful act and causes damage to the other state, that first state is under a duty, under international law, to make full reparation, including full compensation. There is no, however, in international law, a mechanism to implement that rule into reality. And in the world's history, especially in the past 70 years, this rule was implemented only in one of two ways. Either with the agreement of both sides, for example, a peace agreement to conclude or decision of the UN Security Council that impose things on states against their will. For obvious reasons, neither of these two options are available for us, for Ukraine, because Russia is not cooperating, and Russia is not cooperating in the Security Council as well. So we had to come up and propose a concept to implement that rule that the guilty state should make reparation to the victim state despite of those difficulties. And Ukraine made that proposal in the form of a proposal for a comprehensive compensation mechanism for Ukraine that would consist of three main pillars or three main phases. Phase one, this is what we're dealing with right now, is to establish the register of damage to create a record of the damage that was caused by Russia to Ukraine. That record of damage is created through the submission of claims for compensation by all those who have suffered from the Russian aggression, from the people, from the businesses, and from the Ukrainian government. We create that record. This is what our mandate is, to not review these claims on substance, to not evaluate them in monetary value, but just to make sure that they are eligible, that they are claims for damage caused by Russian war against Ukraine and not for something else. After we do that, the second pillar of the mechanism is what we call a claims commission. It is a body that will adjudicate these claims, review them on substance, evaluate the damage that is caused, and issue an award for compensation of damage that will be a representation of how much exactly Russia owes to each individual, each company, and each government that was harmed by its war, and cumulatively how much Russia owes as reparations to Ukraine for its aggression. And then the third pillar of this mechanism is the compensation fund, to work on the issue of where does the money come from to pay the claimants who will have received the compensation awards. In a normal environment, in a normal world, Russia would comply with these awards voluntarily. We're not talking about Russia as someone who is willing to comply with international law, so we do not make that assumption. And of course, then we have this elephant in the room in the form of $300 billion of Russian assets, sovereign assets, that are frozen in other countries that potentially could be confiscated or repurposed and directed towards payment of reparations. To sort of get this question out of our way, of course, we understand that even if we get hold of the 300 billion, which is still an uphill battle, it will not be enough to compensate everybody for everything. You have heard from Svetlana's presentation this morning that even a modest assessment by the World Bank and others on the reconstruction needs comes up with a figure of $486 billion. So 300 is barely a half, just over a half. But 300 billion is a good start. If we can get hold of that, that would probably make our life a little bit better. But before we get to dividing the money, we have to first kill the proverbial bear. And before we kill proverbial bear, we have to understand what we're dealing with in terms of a scope. And that means finding a way to allow everybody to be able to submit claims for damage. And not just claims, but also evidence. Because in the end of the day, we are in the context of a legal process. So all of our processes, all of our decisions, first and foremost, must be based on evidence. And in our work, we are trying to find a balance between what it is that we have to insist the claimants submit to us to support their claims, to be able to make decisions on them in the future, and balance it against what it is that the claimants can realistically be expected to submit, considering that it is sometimes difficult to collect evidence on the battlefield or in the context of a war. Another point that I should make before going into the Q&A that is planned is that the mandate of the register is comprehensive. In principle, we want to be able to record all damage, loss, and injury that was caused by Russian aggression to Ukraine. That means material and non-material. That means direct and indirect. When it comes to individuals, we're talking about loss of life, injury, torture, suffering, sexual violence, deprivation of liberty, forceful displacement, deportation, and so on and so forth. We, of course, talk about property. We talk about loss of gainful employment and other economic loss. When we talk about government and business, we talk about, again, property, direct losses, for example, losses to facilities, to destruction of facilities and infrastructure, but also indirect losses of business and economic damage that is forward-looking. We're also looking at things that are not directly linked to economy, things like destruction, damage or destruction to historic and cultural heritage, and destruction and damage to environment. So all that is comprehensive. For each of these categories, we have 44 categories of damage that we have now listed in our rules. There will be rules, there will be requirements for evidence, and about 6 weeks ago, we started receiving claims in the first category, that is damage and destruction of residential real estate, destruction of housing in simple terms. So we are now receiving claims from individuals who have lost their houses or apartments. All the claims will be submitted to us or are submitted to us in digital form through DIA. Ukrainians know what that is. It's a government services app and a web portal that is accessible to everyone in Ukraine. What is fairly new is that we will also require legal entities to submit that evidence through DIA. We're designing the system for that. And in our next batch of categories that we will open for submission, we'll also have the first categories for government and business, including damage and destruction to critical infrastructure of Ukraine. So looking at colleagues like Svetlana, who will have to learn the process of navigating DIA, navigating our claim forms to submit also large and complex claims. I can talk forever, so I will stop here and happy to answer the questions.
Thank you, Markiyan. So we more or less already understand what's the purpose of this register, but can you explain us a bit more on how this register was created? What the history of this register?
Well, the history, to the extent that it makes any sense to dwell on history, was that we started with a group of people with Ukrainian government. We started talking outside of Ukraine with states and organizations about this concept of compensation mechanism that I had mentioned. It quickly became clear that it will be very, very difficult to create it all at once. So the decision was made to follow a stepwise approach, go step by step. The first step of action was to propose to the UN General Assembly a resolution supporting this idea. So in November of 2022, on the 14th of November, the General Assembly adopted a resolution that had three main points in it. One, politically speaking and legally speaking, the resolution said that Russia must be held to account for its war in Ukraine, including in terms of being liable for compensation of damages that war is causing. Second, the resolution recognized the need for establishing a compensation mechanism to deal with the consequences of the war. And third, recommended the establishment of the register of damage as the first step. After that resolution, we focused on negotiations about the register of damage. And we received a proposal from the Council of Europe, a very well-known international organization, to establish the register of damage under its auspices through a peculiar little instrument called an enlarged partial agreement. That is a form of cooperation between both members and non-members of the Council of Europe that allows them to speak about specific issues of interest to states. So through that work and through cooperation and engagement with 43 states in the European Union, in May of last year, more or less a year ago, we reached an agreement to establish the register of damage with headquarters in The Hague that would serve its purpose, and that is meant to be the first component of the compensation mechanism, followed by the Claims Commission and the Compensation Fund. That's as far as I can go about history, because history was not really all that long. It all went really quickly. I'm quite sure that we set some sort of a world record in establishing international organizations, because we went from zero to a functioning organization in about 3 months, and we went from, well, me being employee number one, quite technically in that organization, to becoming operational and starting receiving claims in 9 months and 1 day.
Interesting. And could you also mention, is there any like similar registers that already operate, or let's say something unique what we can observe here?
There are similar concepts and similar organizations in principle that we looked at and drew inspiration from. When it comes to registers of damage, the most comparable one probably is what is called UNRWAD, United Nations Register of Damage, created to deal with the consequences of the construction of the wall in the occupied territories of Palestine. It was established in 2007. And it is exactly what we are, a register of damage. What makes it extremely different among many different things, many other things, what makes it particularly different from us is the scope. Because in the more than 15 years of its operation, it received only about 80,000 claims. We, in just the category that we launched last month, the damage and destruction of housing, we expect to receive between 300 and 600,000 claims, and altogether throughout the register between 6 and 8 million. So as a concept, UNRWAD is somewhat comparable. In practical reality, there's very little that we can draw from UNRWAD to inform how we get set up, how we operate. We basically have to we have to basically invent ourselves from that perspective.
Okay, can you also name like the biggest challenges that you have right now in terms of running this register?
Where do I start? The biggest challenge is balancing the need to do things quickly and to do things right. We like, and I should put things in context. We like to talk about how fast we sometimes are, and really going from zero to starting receiving claims in 9 months is incredibly fast. But also from the point of view of Ukrainians, it can never be fast enough. So there's always going to be pressure on us to deliver as fast as possible. When we say, oh, we started this category of claims, but the claims for loss of life will be available in 3 to 5 months, people who have lost their relatives in the war, for them, 3 to 5 months is an eternity. They want an outlet right now. So that always creates a pressure on us. But on the other hand, we very acutely understand that the register of damage and the entire reparation process is a project that will be measured in years. And it is considerably more important to do it right on the grand scheme of things, to do it right than to do it absolutely quickly, especially when we have to build all the systems from zero. So one example of that is building the digital system that will allow submission and processing of claims digitally on that scale. Anyone who has had to deal with IT development understands how difficult it is to get new systems up and running without errors, without bugs, so that it was able to handle millions and millions of claims. That takes time. From that perspective, that probably is the biggest day-to-day challenge, balancing these things, this element of really desire and pressure and need to do things fast, but also to do it right so that everything worked.
So you expect quite a big number of claims, yeah? And how do you planning to overcome this issue with that data verification?
This is a really great question that we are just in the process of answering. We start with a simple fact that we simply must accept, that we will never be able to do that manually going from case by case. There's just too many cases. It will take too much time. I don't want to create a system that has no choice but to work for 150 years before it gets through all the claims, because people need redress, people need reparation at least within the reasonable expectation horizon. So if we accept that fact, then we have to accept the reality that we have to embrace the modern technology and what it gives to us. Again, we have to look at what living in the 21st century gives us in terms of software, in terms of AI, and ability to process large amounts of data. So verification of data relies on us being modern. One horizon, one degree of verification comes from the process of submission of claims to begin with. We do not just ask claimants to submit, PDFs of everything or photos of everything. We get as much information as possible from existing Ukrainian sources and databases that are automatically connected to us through the DIA application. For example, in the first category that we launched, damage and destruction of residential real estate, we rely on the register of damaged and destroyed property that Ukraine has established as part of its e-recovery program, when Ukrainian government offers aid and support for people to rebuild their houses that had been destroyed in the war. There are about 70,000 relatively completed cases, and by completed, I mean cases that have been verified by local Ukrainian authorities that yes, there is this house, it was damaged, this is the degree of damage, this is how much it costs to recover. All that information is stored in the register of damaged and destroyed property. We connect to that register. So once a claimant files an application to us, we draw on that information automatically with the claimant's permission, of course. So we already have at least semi-verified bits of information about what had happened to the claimant. Then in that sense, an interesting fact that I like to share, there are in the claim form for that category of claims, there's approximately 200 data fields that are submitted to us. About 3/4 of them, just under 150, are drawn from various databases in Ukraine automatically, so claimants do not have to fill them or submit any evidence. They can, if they want to, submit anything else, but they don't have to. The other layer of verification of evidence is on the processing side. For us to be able to analyze the claims, cross-check the claims, cross-reference them with other similar claims, cross-reference them with databases of events So if we know, for example, from some source that there was a shelling, there was a missile strike in that area on that day, we can cross-reference that with the claims that we will have received, and that way we can verify what had happened. Of course, AI will help us in making those cross-references easier, faster, and better. But it also comes with the challenge of applying artificial intelligence in a responsible and reliable way, and always having a pair of human eyes watch what AI does.
And how we, as a legal community, compliance community, can we somehow utilize this register? Is it like open to everyone, or like everyone can have access to this register? How does it look like?
No, unfortunately, everyone will not have access to it. I mean, we are talking about personal data of millions of people, and more or less a quite complete picture about the state of Ukraine from a point of view of destruction and damage. So that will, of course, be very, very closely guarded secret, and we're actually going to great lengths to not allow unauthorized access to it. What the legal community can do and should do is to help claimants submit claims. I think it's fair to say that for people in this room, it's easier compared to some of the others to go through the rules of the register that are all published on our website, understand the process, understand how it works, understand what preparations needs to be done, and to help claimants submit claims. And we're not just talking about big corporate clients, we're also talking about regular people. So I'm sure that most of the law firms represented here have pro bono programs, you know, I was, as Andrii said, I was at law firms some time ago. We had a pro bono program, and that's how we would help just people get access to this service, by helping them fill a claim form, submit a claim, prepare evidence, and so on and so forth. We plan to do that on a nationwide scale. We plan to engage, and we're starting to engage, the network of free legal advice that is state governed, to be able to provide legal assistance to people in every corner of Ukraine in that sense. But of course, you know, private bar, private legal community can also help with that.
Can you elaborate a bit more on the process, claim submission process? Like how long it takes, how does it look like?
So the claim submission process happens in DIA. Right now it happens in both the mobile application that we all have on our phones, all us Ukrainians, and through the web portal on dia.gov.ua. So far it is incredibly simple. So the average time for completion of a claim form for destruction of housing right now is under 10 minutes. And it is in principle super intuitive. It does not, you know, take a law degree to figure out how to do this. So, you know, basically people have to go to DIA, they get, you know, they log in, they get authenticated as for who they are, and then they simply follow the claim form, fill the fields, review the information, click submit, and there it is. Of course, not everything will be as easy as this, because there will be categories where there's no database with automated evidence. There will have to be manual submission of files and statements and descriptions and so on. But again, we are designing this process to be as simple and as intuitive for an average person as we can. When it comes to legal entities in the government, it will be a little bit more complicated, just because of the nature of the claim, just because of how the claims are in these categories. And it is one of our challenges, how to ask claimants to structure that information so that we could easily process it, understand what the claim is all about, understand the evidence, and then prepare to make a decision. So unlike for individuals, for legal entities, there will be a requirement also to provide a narrative description of the claim. What are we talking about? What kind of property are we talking about? What kind of damage it sustained? What kind of value are we talking about? And generally to understand this, what it is. Because if we get as evidence just the list of destroyed, you know, transformator stations, it will be very difficult for us to understand what exactly had happened. But again, it should be in principle quite easy and intuitive, even if some categories of claims may take a little bit more work than others.
And can you also tell us a bit more about categories, like what kind of categories are going to be?
So we have three groups of categories. We call them A, B, and C, based on the type of a claimant. A claims are claims by individuals. So I briefly talked about them. They include a large variety of claims from involuntary displacement, both internally and externally, to loss of life, to missing persons, to serious personal injury, to the consequences of the alleged war crimes, such as torture, sexual violence, inhumane treatment, deprivation of liberty, forced labor, and so on and so forth. Of course, property claims and economic claims, such as the loss of gainful employment because of the war. Then we have B and C claims. B claims that are to a large degree, they're somewhat similar. B claims are claims from the government, and C claims are claims from legal entities, for the most part, businesses. For the most part, they are about property. So that mentioned destruction to property, to enterprises, to facilities, public facilities. That includes, in the context of businesses, that includes claims for indirect business losses. Then there's claims related to environment, claims related to cultural and historic and religious heritage. There's a category of claims related to the costs of demining of Ukrainian territories. So really, as I said, we mean to be quite comprehensive to cover more or less everything, all the consequences that the war is causing in Ukraine, as long, and maybe I should have mentioned this earlier, as long as the claim fits three eligibility criteria that we have in our statute. The claims must be for damage that has occurred in the territory of Ukraine, including the occupied territories such as Donbass and the Crimea. The claims must be for damage that has occurred on or after 24th of February 2022, and it must be for damage that is linked, that was caused by the Russian aggression, that is linked to the Russian aggression. As long as the claim is within these three criteria, it can be recorded in the register.
Do I understand correctly that international companies, investors who operate in Ukraine and who were damaged by, so they're also able to file a complaint?
Yes, that's exactly right. There is no nationality criteria when it comes to the claimant. So foreign companies, foreign investors, foreign citizens can file claims as long as the damage has occurred in the territory of Ukraine.
All right. And can you tell us a bit more about the future plans, like in terms of expanding, enhancing the register?
So on future plans, it's both very simple and very complicated. In simple terms, our immediate plans is to expand what we are doing and increase the number of categories that are all open for submission of claims. Like I said, over the summer, we plan to launch between 10 and 12 new categories that I've mentioned before. Another batch will be launched in the fall. Our aim is to open everything for submission in the 12 months since we started operations in April, so that everybody could submit a claim. Of course, our emphasis is on claims from individuals, from those who suffer the most, and claims that have relevance for that, for example, critical infrastructure. But we, of course, are not forgetting about other government claims, about business claims. So from that point on, it will be going quite in parallel. The biggest constraint there, to be quite honest with you, is the difficulty in designing and expanding the technical systems that are required for handling of these amounts of data. In parallel to that, I should say that also in our plans is the outreach program. So we will be increasing and intensifying our communications both in Ukraine and outside of Ukraine to reach claimants, to inform them about the register, about what we are, what we do, and why it is important to submit claims to the register. And then, of course, the other parallel thing that we are doing, we are quite in the early stages of that work, but that work has already started, is the work to establish a claims commission, the next phase in the reparations process that would allow these claims to not only be recorded as claims, but also to be adjudicated and to result in compensation awards. That work will take time, and that's a complex multilateral international negotiations, but we already started that work.
Okay. I have a much longer list of questions still, and I guess that people in audience as well, but unfortunately we are running out of the time, and at this point, anyway, Markiyan is still here, so if you have any other questions, I guess that he's going to be happy to answer them. And at that point of time, I would like to hand over and to start our next panel and to give a floor to Irina Pariashvili to start our next